It is the closer. It is kind of the hat on top of a great outfit.
I'd say France are the best team in the Hemisphere.
Great crowds as well.
Oh, the best. He has become like a properly lethal player who can do things that no one else can.
Hell of a try the other week, by the way.
Great try.
What a touch.
Great try,
Chip, if you
yeah.
haven't seen it, chip and chase, little
Like,
hand over.
tapping it over the head.
Tap it over the head. Like,
Brilliant.
naughty try. ...2025 has been a brilliant year for rugby, and it's been a great year for the podcast. But it's going to get even better because we are joined by Squidge Rugby.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel very much like I feel like I've been here enough that like I'm more sustaining the level it's been at already. I'm undermining the episode before it's even begun. It's going to get even better.
It's going to get
This
better.
is going to be the pinnacle of podcasting ever.
Yeah, well, when you next come back,
Then we'll step it up again. For now. Like,
you literally
for
are
the
part of the
foreseeable
furniture now.
future. Yeah, it feels that way. Yeah.
Well, it's
Well, you
great.
sat on me earlier.
It was great to have you back.
Yeah.
In today's episode, we are looking ahead to the Autumn Nations series.
So far this year, it's been an amazing year for rugby, from the Rugby World Cup, Lions Tours, the Six Nations, the Rugby Championship, everything that's gone on in the international game. Where does the Autumn Nations series rank as it comes to the close of 2025?
I think that's it, isn't it? It is the closer. It is kind of the hat on top of a great outfit. It's like an addition where you're like, oh, you know what? I thought like after the World Cup, I was like, I'm perfectly satiated and happy with the amount of Test rugby I've had this year. And then they throw on top, you're going to get to watch France against South Africa. You're going to get to watch Ireland rematch New Zealand in Chicago. You're going to get to watch Wales try and win a rugby match. Like, there's so many great games kind of coming up over this next month, which they very much feel like the cherry on top of a great year rather than necessarily in competition with the rest of it.
The autumn I always absolutely love because you've sort of obviously done your Six Nations, done your summer tours, and then you've watched the Rugby Championship from afar, watching these teams like get momentum and go really well, and you think, I want a shot at them. And of course you then do. So where it sits and how it is and the consequences, of course, with, you know, the Rugby World Cup pools being announced at the end of the autumn. Like there's more consequences than ever, I feel, on this series for some teams. Now, some teams are safe because of where they situate. They can't be caught. But yeah, I love the autumn series.
It's funny though, because the autumn, like for the Southern Hemisphere teams, it's the end of their year.
Yeah, it is.
Whereas for the Northern Hemisphere teams, it's the start of the international season, isn't it? So I always think it's a bit like, so you've got these Southern Hemisphere teams that are coming hot off the Rugby Championship. They're probably been together quite a while now, in camp together, they're in form, and they can come here on a hot streak. I know they're looking towards the end of their season, but for some of those teams who've played them where, like, some of them come really hot and want to, like New Zealand, I think playing all four home nations, they want to swoop them. Whereas like sometimes we've had previous teams where you've had a couple of bad results and it's basically just get to the end of the year and get the results out of the way and then start again next year. Whereas to say for the Northern Hemisphere teams, because it's the start of the season, it's always a bit like, because you're playing these teams like once, you never played New Zealand in probably England, played them in a year. So they're always edgy, but you're kind of a bit like, there's that, not inbuilt excuse, but you want to beat them, but actually they're in hot form, they're good to go, we're building, it's a one-off game, we'll see where we are, but you know what I mean, a lot of the Northern Hemisphere teams kind of rely on that sort of safety blanket of, oh, they're in form, it's fine.
That's the really exciting thing about the World Cup seeding coming straight afterwards, I think, is that it forces everyone to be approaching this in the same way, right? That you, when they've done it in past and done it a year after the World Cup has taken place, they then do the seeding 12 months later. That autumn campaign, you have some teams who are rebuilding, some teams who've just like lost a lot of players and bringing new people through, people in different places, right? You have sometimes a team will go on, you know, a rough run of form and then, you know, happened, whereas I don't know if you remember the 2015 World Cup very well, but like, you know, Wales had a rough run in 2012, had a bad autumn campaign, ended up dropping down a seeding, then go into a pool with, I think it was England they were in with. I don't really remember the competition that well. But like that can happen, right? Where here it forces, even though you do have the old team that's having in a bit of rebuild, teams are forced to come in and play their strongest team for this campaign, right? So there's been a lot of talk about Ireland in particular. Should they be rebuilding? This is probably the campaign where they need to go, no, we need to go strong for this one. And then weirdly, it's the only Six Nations where you'd be going, maybe you do need to rebuild a bit there or over the next 2 years leading into that World Cup. Like it's a really interesting level of that World Cup seeding taking place at the end.
And that is such a great point. And that's why I think it is, you know, this autumn series, you are going to see the teams going at it. And rather than you say that sort of rotation policy, maybe let's say, or teams can sort of blood certain players. The only team that can do that still, I think, is South Africa, because their depth is insane. But I suspect, you know, every team will be trying to get the results they need to give themselves best chance, of course, when the seedings get announced.
We'll come to the seedings at some point in the show, because there's a lot of things to talk about. We've got a preview with Ireland, New Zealand this weekend in Chicago. We've got to talk about where the Rugby Championship victors, South Africa, sit, where they're at with this summer, with this autumn series after a bit of change in their squad. We've got to see where France are at. We've got all the obviously home nations, how they're improving, where they're at. We've got Australia off the back of Lions, Rugby Championship improvements, where they're going to be at, like with change going on with their coaching staff after this tournament. So, yeah, we've got lots to discuss.
Well, Wales, the impact of Tandy coming in. We need to touch on that, of course.
Yep.
Can Scotland finally beat the All Blacks? We better mention that.
We can ask the question.
Oh, yeah, we can ask the question.
So we've already talked about England. We sort of previewed England a bit in last week's episode, so go listen to that now. So let's talk about Australia and where they're at after the back of a beginning of this season, start of 2025. Some people wrote them off, or end of last season, 2024. They've had the Lions, which you saw a sort of rejuvenate in Australia Rugby Championship. They picked up results, beat South Africa. And now, so where are they at? I mean, Joe Smith's coming to the end of his tenure after this autumn series. Do you reckon they want to win everything for him, or are they looking to sort of evolve and move on?
A little bit of both, I think. Joe Smith's done a brilliant job for Australia, and it's a real shame he isn't able to carry on. There's various personal reasons that led to that. But he has really built them into a team that feel like if he was carrying on, they would be a force at their home World Cup in 2 years' time. Like, they'd be a team that'd be a banana skin at any World Cup that wasn't in Australia. But in Australia, you go, oh, actually, that is an extra 10% that could get into a semi-final, or, And then once you're into semi-final, who knows what can happen from there. There's then a question mark over how does Schmidt play this? Does he look to hand over? Does he look to put things in place and perhaps change his team about a bit, or perhaps look to just set things up and leave a good foundation? Or is it more about just giving yourself a great send-off, right? Is this an end of an era, or is this a handover? And we don't know quite how he's going to approach that. I suspect it being Joe Schmidt, and you look at everything he's done at every team he's been at in the past, he wants to win, right? He wants his teams to be the best they possibly can be. And so I suspect we'll see them approach it same as the Rugby Championship, where there was a little bit of like, we know we're not expected to win this, but we will go out and give it a great lash. And that was how they won at Twickenham last year. That was how they won at Ellis Park against the Springboks. And they are a team who has the odd, absolutely incredible performance in them. You look at the talent across that team, it is incredible when they've got their strongest team out, like the players in there. They've got, with the likes of Noe Tanase and Carl Gordon coming back from Rugby League as well in the next couple of years, more talent coming in that can kind of back that up a little bit. But for now, I think it's probably about trying to get that starting 15 as tight together, in as good form as possible, with confidence they can beat all the teams they'll come up against when that World Cup takes place in a few years' time.
Just a question though, they're not creeping up on anyone though in the autumn, are they? Like that's previously, a year ago,
that's what I was going to say.
They were kind of like underdogs and they'd come off the Rugby Championship where they got hammered. I think people were probably not wrote them off, but kind of didn't take them seriously, but they were the underdogs. Whereas I think like now in the Northern Hemisphere, people are like England, Australia in the first game. England will be know what they're about. Obviously, Australia beat them last play of the game a year ago, so not creeping up in England. And again, it's gonna be a fascinating game, and I look forward to it.
So, full disclosure, we're actually recording this episode before Australia played Japan because that is the first game that they're playing on their tour. Also, I wanted to sort of delve into a bit of Australia and what people expect for this tour, because a lot of people I think would have watched them against the Lions and maybe not seen any of the Rugby Championship or not particularly know where they're at. So if we can give them a bit of an insight in terms of what to look out for, where they are in their journey, to give them a better understanding ahead of the weekend, I think that we will then have done a fantastic job.
And that's just what we intend to do. I think the interesting thing is there hasn't necessarily been a big change in personnel since the Lions. There's been odd players who've come in, the odd change, but really we have seen some drastic form increases over the last few months. You look at Harry Wilson, how well he's been playing at number 8, again, was dropped by Eddie Jones for that last World Cup, then kind of came in midway through last year. Joe Smith went, let's have a look at what this kid's about, because he looked very good as a youngster. And it's just grown and grown and grown as a leader. Had an incredible game at Ellis Park. Did have an injury, is in the squad, so you suspect he'll be back. Whether he plays at Twickenham, we'll find out. But Max Jorgensen as well, throughout the winger, who 21 years old, was 20 on the Lions tour. He's an incredibly young kid, but he's so good at the minute. Scored the winning try at Twickenham last year as kind of a bit of a bolter in the squad, as someone who'd had a few good games in Super Rugby. They're then taken on tour to get a bit of experience. They picked up a couple of injuries. He got in. Picked up a couple of injuries again before the Lions. He starts all 3 games. He is excellent in all of them. and then has gone up gear after gear after gear. He's so good in the air. He's a brilliant finisher. He can score tries. You look at one of the ones he scored against the Springboks at Ellis Park, was one of the best solo tries you'll see all year. He has become like a properly lethal player who can do things that no one else can. And he's got there from promising young kid a year ago to properly world class now. And I think we're seeing more and more of those players start to step up a little bit as this tour goes on.
Well, I think the big thing with Australia, one thing I've loved is, you know how when they played against the Lions and people would have seen it, how they tried to sort of pick around the ruck and sort of tighten up. And actually one thing they've done recently is actually you've seen Lenny Katau slot into those positions, centres, wingers come off the wing, and almost condense the entire team and get real momentum around that, trying to create more speed of ball, more momentum around the ruck, certainly in 22 attacks. So look out for that for sure. I think with the Australian situation as well, is if I look at where they were last year, and it got brought up, you know, Coley, you said it, is it was a free swing for them last year. Like there was no expectation really, given the Rugby Championship. But actually there's a lot of, okay, what they're going to be like. But equally, Australia know psychologically they're in a better spot than they were last year, and they came and got the business done. And I think that Australian mindset will be that they feel confident to go out there and actually they're the team that have got minutes under their belt. They're the team that are coming to Allianz Twickenham. They're the team that are in form and all this and try and catch England cold. And I think how they do that is probably by their multi-phase attack, because obviously Richard Wigglesworth is now doing England's defence. So yes, I imagine there's similarities there, but he's doing that. You look who also, Lee Blackett's going to be doing the England attack. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of clunkiness to England, which is fine. That's totally understandable. But I think the Australian mindset with that, they'll play on that, and they'll try and build pressure ball in hand. And the way they do that, multi-phase attack, go through the phases, build pressure ball in hand, because they've always had those strike runners. Yeah. Like, yes, Tom Wright isn't available with an ACL. Yes, they've got certain personnel missing, but they've still got enough strike power there that I think that they'll look to hold on to the ball and go multi-phase against England.
I think it'll be fascinating how the teams match up. Like, England will be wounded from a year ago. I think if the game gets loose, as in it's turnover and balls bouncing and stuff, it favours Australia. Like, you watch Australia against Africa, when South Africa basically thought they were going to score every time they touched the ball and sort of got loose, and then Australia pick it up and they got guys that can run the length of the field or score within 2 phases. Even against the Lions, remember that second test where Australia scored and there was a kick-off, they went pass and basically scored. So I think if the game gets loose, it favours Australia. So I think England are probably going to try and make it a big set-piece game, keep Australia out of their half and make sure it doesn't get loose, you know what I mean? And they're going to be very controlled. I think you might see a similar performance how England played against Argentina in the summer, where they kick a lot, make it aerial, go aerial on the guys and make it contestable and try to play the game in Australia's half. Because Australia are dangerous, I think, A, turnover, and B, as you say, they go multi-phase attack in your half, get a penalty, kick for the corner, and they've got strike moves, or they've got Ikitau and Salih and people like that can exploit one-on-one spaces when they're 5 meters out. So it's going to be a good matchup of how, I think there's definitely two different styles of rugby going to be played, which is how England probably make it a set-piece game and how Australia was trying to get it loose or structured in England's half.
I think it's the thing about this Australia team is they're a team that are always playing for 80 minutes. Like, you look at them across whether it's those games of Rugby Championship, like the Argentina game they won in the last play, South Africa they scored again in the last play, England last year, obviously infamously last play, Wales they hit 50 in the last play. They're a team who will be going the entire way, right? So there's a bit of a worry for England. Like, you think about that game last year, and they started so well, England. They look like they're in complete control, and we're going to absolutely blow them away in the first 20 odd minutes. And then England got a little bit, I don't want to say complacent, but a little bit like, oh, we've won the game already, right? And Australia came back into it and kept playing. And even when Itoje scored 3 minutes ago, Australia didn't see that as the game over. And I think that presents a really interesting challenge for England, is you've got to stay switched on for 80 minutes, because you know, even though this is a team that they should be better than on paper, are they going to have that kind of like mindset shift to play for 80? And I think that's something we saw them do really well against Argentina in the summer. England was stay switched on right till the end, because there has been moments, I think, over the last couple of years where we've seen them have a great 60 minutes and then maybe the last 20 was weaker, or vice versa, or start poorly then turn it around.
I think that Australia-England game was a sort of, not a turning point for this England team, but I think like lost to like New Zealand and South Africa, it wasn't really a problem. I think like in the summer tour, this is a year ago, New Zealand, you lose. But I think the Australia game, you favoured to win, you went ahead, and then England got loose and it played into Australia's hands. And I think like it would not surprise me this weekend if, say, George Ford starts at 10 and brings the Australia, and basically George Ford doesn't get bored of doing the good, the same stuff, the boring stuff, as we say, do we? And that's how I think, keep Australia at bay, because you say their teams almost score early on Australia, relax, like South Africa. I think they won 21-0 up or something, didn't they? And then basically didn't score again. I think that's how it'll be interesting to see the battle of, I'm pretty sure Steve Borthwick were telling England all week, like, keep just doing the basic, you know what I mean? And it's going to be, and then you can open up like England did in the Six Nations. It's like you build a score, and then you can open up if you need to once you're forward over the front. But I think like George Ford's won at 10 like that, they're going to be pretty structured in how they play. And then with Blackett coming, England will come alive when they get set piece in Australia's half.
Playing against Australia was one of my favourite fixtures. England-Australia rivalry is awesome. And I think, as you say, when Australia play a bit loose, I actually always enjoy that, because you can punish them for their looseness, but equally they don't, you play against some teams and just physically you just can't get any pay through them, like going multi-phase. But actually Australia, you can. And like, I'm not saying that, but you can get a little bit more speed of ball, and they're brilliant at the breakdown, especially McWright, like absolute nuisance. But I always enjoyed Australia because the way that they played, it leaves them open to then go at them at the same game a little bit, but you don't want, it's just trying to manage that balance. I think for England this weekend, the most important thing for them is, given the great sort of end of the Six Nations, given the summer tour success, is how do they make themselves, their game plan this weekend needs to be actually very simple and basic. And basic, what I mean by, because they've had 3 days in training camp and then they've had 1 week to prepare. They haven't had the time that Australia have had going into this. So there is a definitely short on cohesion and understanding. So like you said, Coley, England need to be really efficient at getting out their half. They need to be very, very efficient in terms of their strike plays, which Lee Blackett will do, have that waxed. But almost what you'll see, I think, is a real, I don't think England, you'll see loads from England, but that's normal. You would expect that. The England we see in round one to the England we see in the last game against Argentina, I think will be two very different views and styles. And I think the most important thing for England is to actually get off to a winning start, do Australia. And the way they do that is actually going in with a really sort of simple game plan. And with that is your set piece. It is the way that you get out your half. It is being comfortable defending for large periods. It is then being so clinical that, you know, you might get a jackal penalty. You then kick for the corner. Well, you've got to know your free phrase strikes really, really well. And there's certain individuals within that England team that can have a big impact in doing that. And you say if they get caught into that looseness, I don't think it suits them right now, because it's game one and they've had such short prep.
Yeah. If you do have a week of incredibly short prep coming into the first game of an autumns, do you have any time to spend looking at the opposition, or are you entirely just looking at your own game plan?
Very little. Like scrums, of course, you'd look at certain aspects. You'd look at. So it might be what you're going to, how many kick returns you're going to receive.
I would say England's a bit different, because I think England will, like, the coach will be looking at Australia and they'll be formulating game plan to beat Australia. Like some teams, I think, like probably Australia in some regards have a way they're going to play, and they play it that way no matter who they're playing against. Whereas I think England are very structured to who they're playing against, and when they have a advantage, they'll play more ball in hand. When they sort of don't, they'll muddy the game up. So England, the coach will be looking at that and say, when they present to the players, it'll be, this is our game plan. We're going to go after these things, but the game plan is to make Australia play like left-handed and stuff, which will be the way I think they'll go about it. But when you're in camp, yeah, you will watch Australia's games, but I say, when we've got that short period of time, the first part of the week will be getting physically fresh, because you're playing, guys in the Prem have played the weekend, and previously you always had that weekend off. Whereas now you come into camp, you probably won't be able to fully go until, you have to go physically on the Tuesday, but it'll be tapered down. So yeah, it'll be more about installing the game plan and how that affects Australia.
Tactical walkthroughs, more meetings, more sort of small unit meetings, everything like that.
But that might also play into, think about this, more play into England structuring the game, because if the game gets loose and everyone's got to run around, Australia are physically conditioned to play that game, whereas England boys have been in Prem, hadn't had some of them have only played a game or two, and some less than that. So England might not be physically conditioned to run around 80 minutes and play ball in play. So actually England might want to go slow the game down, make it structured, and almost take the heat out of the game and try and punish Australia in that regard. And Australia might conversely see that and go, well, we need to have the ball in play, we need to take quick line outs, we need to run around, we need to run England off their feet. So I think that's another thing we have to think about.
For me, the hardest game England face is this first one. And that is purely just because the training time, the limited preparation they've got, and because some guys haven't played a huge amount. So I think that, then they play Fiji the following week, then they get to New Zealand. By the time they play New Zealand, 3 weeks in camp or whatever it will be, like they'll be in a far better spot. So yeah, there's a lot on this one, and I think like it plays into the crowd and the atmosphere defense, because almost the crowd's expectation is they don't really know, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, like they don't really know.
I think it's going to be a big, because sometimes you go into the autumn, right, and the Twickenham crowd can have a big, like, they can be edgy, and you know what I mean. And sometimes I think it's like every time England play New Zealand, because teams don't play each other very often, there's an edge to it. Similar to South Africa and Australia as well. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that energy, if it feeds into the England team or could be used against Australia, if you know what I mean. Because I think like if England go out there and I think the good thing is after the Argentina tour, the fans have gone from play more rugby to actually, oh no, if you win games of rugby playing that way, you're winning, and that's brilliant. You know what I mean? And George Ford's brilliant at kicking the ball, and George, you don't have to play 100 phases. Like England are so good at this, and I think that might shift the crowd in regards to, again, instead of entertain us, it's actually let's beat the Australians and just beat them no matter how. And I think that'll feed into how England play the game. And so it's always fascinating in the autumn, I think, with the crowd, because again, as you say, they don't know how England play. You don't know really the form, but you know the opposition's quite good. So it's, you know what I mean? It'd be interesting how the crowd goes and how that feeds into the teams.
Weirdly, losing last year does give Steve Borwick a bit more license to play boring rugby. You know, like if this is the game plan he's always been wanting to play, is very kick heavy and so on, leading into a World Cup. Does having lost that game to Australia mean that they go, well, you know, we're just happy as fans that they've won the game no matter what, rather than being, I think, if they'd won, you know, 9-6 last year, people would have gone, this Australia team's crap. Like, we should be beating them better than that. I don't know. There's maybe there's some blessing in disguise bit for.
As I say, I think that this will be the thing with England. I think Steve as well known him, and it'll be, can they stick to the game plan and be disciplined to stick through 80 minutes of the game? Right, against Australia last year, it worked really well for the first 15. They scored twice, and then it became loose, and they favoured Australia. So I think like Steve will be literally like, if we score twice, go up 20 points or 30 points, 10 or 15 points in the first half, first 10 minutes is like, we stick to the game plan. We're not going away from it. We stick to it, and almost testing the players and seeing. And George Ford is perfect. It's like it was in Argentina, but like keep doing the same things and don't get loose. And we do this, and then if I need to empty the bench, I can. But yeah, I think it'll be, again, that whole, as a player, I think it's a massive test on a short, as an England player, it's a massive test for them on a short week, physically prep, but it's the mental game, and also the don't get affected by who you play in Australia. We play our game, we play our game plan, and then afterwards, if you stick to the game plan, we'll be good. If you don't, we won't be.
Well, we will know soon enough. And of course, we will be reviewing all the games after the weekend. And on last week's episode, we also revealed that we've been working on plans for a live tour for 2026. Coley, what is happening with it?
We're doing a tour of some capital cities: Edinburgh, Dublin, London, Cardiff. And we're also heading to some rugby hotbeds, which are Cheltenham, Manchester, Birmingham, and Exeter. New
locations for 2026 from where we last toured. Looking forward to it. How do the THBs get hold of tickets?
Good question, Ben. There'll be an exclusive link coming out November the 5th in my newsletter. So you have to subscribe, click in the episode description to do that.
Well, there we go. Excellent. Looking forward to the tour. The biggest game of the weekend is arguably Ireland versus New Zealand in Chicago. Given the history between these two teams, and maybe let's say the spice between these two teams, it's almost a shame it's not being played in Ireland, to be honest with you.
Though obviously it's a rematch.
I'm all about taking abroad, but I don't know.
It's obviously a rematch for the 9th anniversary rather than doing it next year for 10th. I guess with the World League and so on supposedly happening, they wanted the control of the fixture list. Of the first time Ireland ever beat the All Blacks, which was on Soldier Field in Chicago, same as in 2016. It was just like one of the great days in Irish rugby history. It's a day which is still talked about an awful lot as, just referred to as Chicago rather than as that game where we did whatever. I still remember it very clearly. I remember not being in, seeing the score and like almost sprinting home and being like, oh, holy shit, this is happening. This is it. All Blacks came back into it. Henshaw scores the winner late on. And it then set up what has become a proper rivalry, right? Now Ireland beat the All Blacks fairly regularly. And it's been a real like proper growing like grudge match between the two. You think about Sexton and Ioane earlier this year and how that all kicked off. You think about that tour a couple of years ago in New Zealand and Peter O'Mahony throwing actually just shit Richie McCaw and all of that. They kind of blew up. This has become one of the games to watch every year. Last year, the All Blacks took it. It was a rainy day and they just played like a perfect tactical game. to dismantle Ireland, and I found incredibly frustrated. And I think for a lot of people, that was kind of not a turning point, but there's a lot of Irish fans that kind of went like, the fact we didn't really fire a shot there was a black mark against Farrell, in a way that as a Welsh fan, I find like ridiculous to be complaining about where they're at. But all the same, this then feels like it's got a lot of pressure on it from an Ireland point of view, and from a New Zealand point of view. A lot of those fans, a lot of those players grew up watching a New Zealand team that beat Ireland by 60 points every time. And now they lose regularly. So like, this is a game where there's always pressure on, and they always look at, I think, very differently to almost any other fixture.
Yeah, last year I almost found last year really underwhelming. Yeah. It was like the massive game. It was a Friday night. It was like everyone was looking forward to like tuning. This is going to be mega.
But New Zealand physically beat them up.
And New Zealand did an absolute job on them, didn't they? Like an absolute job on them. And it sort of reminded everyone like, oh yeah, they are really good. Yeah. But Ireland weren't like, they just got so well beaten, I felt like last year in so many departments. I think with Ireland at the moment, you look at them and they're that team where, we said earlier about, will teams stick or twist or what they do? And at the moment, it seems like very much he's still got the players that he backs and individuals he goes after. But I feel like Ireland are on this cusp of like, the next crop almost needs to start coming through in certain positions. And this weekend I feel there's a lot on this one.
Ireland are in such an interesting place. It's hard to tell where they're at because they have been so good for so long. They were world number 1 earlier this year. And yet they have this aging crop, as you say. A lot of their players are north of 30. This has been a kind of growing concern for a couple of years. They've now reached the point where we've started to see dips in form from a lot of those players as they get older, or dips in pace, dips in whatever. And there's a suspicion, there's a worry, is this going to come home to roost, the fact that they haven't blooded players in certain positions? That is a legitimate fear. There's also been a growing kind of, I think you've covered it elsewhere, but a bit of a kind of very like open debate amongst the Irish fan base, amongst the Irish kind of rugby fans of, do we like what Andy Farrell's doing in building this entire team around a Leinster team who were incredibly successful, who were winning virtually every game? Now that Leinster didn't win Europe last year, did win the ULC in the end, but have then started the season poorly, have only won 1 of their first 4 games. Is that the best way to be building things, right? And that's become a conversation. And I think in some ways it has changed the mood, which could easily be off the same results. They've only lost 1 game this year, right, which was to France. And yet it feels the mood of kind of like the Irish rugby nation feels more sour than it should be from that position. And it's interesting. I feel like Ireland are on the cusp of changing in one direction or the other. It feels like they're either about to really kick on or things are about to slide down a little bit. And whether they rebuild from there or how far they slide, I'm not expecting them to fall to, where Wales are now, but like potentially, are they going to drop down a little bit? Is this kind of the changing? I think this is a really critical autumn for them to kind of prove where they are and who they're going to be over the next 2-4 years. Yeah,
the results that we've so often seen them get, I don't think we're going to see necessarily as regularly as we have done. And I think that also you have to come into consideration is post-Lions tour, that following year, a lot of players either get injured or they struggle to find form because that's no one's fault. It's just the season, literally, this doesn't stop for them. Ireland, they're probably a better posed than anyone else because the fact they get rests and the way that they can shape their contracts are shaped to look after players. But I feel like there's obviously Andy Farrell has a huge amount of trust in certain individuals. We saw that during the Lions tour. We saw the players he went, and they certainly don't let him down. But I just wonder with the history rivalry between these two teams, going to Chicago, New Zealand having a lot of games under their belts going into this game, Ireland not so much, a little bit unclear, the unrest of between, I don't think that doesn't, that also players pick up on that. Yeah. Like they'll know that there's, how many Munster players have been picked compared to Leinster and all this. I just think that I can see New Zealand doing a job a bit similar to what they did last year. I can.
I think it's going to be interesting from my point of view. What I'm looking at Ireland is, again, that evolution of, you actually look at the squad and they say it's like, I go through the bodies like Finlay Billiams 34, Furlong's 32, Ty Byrne Henderson at 33, like Van der Vlier's 32, Gibson Park's 33, like Badiaki's 35, Henshaw's 32, like they've got Samay 33, James Lowe, like how do they do they start looking after those bodies and manage them to the World Cup and roll them out for like New Zealand, but then blood young players in all the other games? Do you then play them in, say, the Six Nations? Do you start taking half them out of the team and just but trying to get everyone to the start line for the World Cup in 2 years' time, and in that period of time building, as you say, depth and not to evolve the teams? I think Ireland are going to play the way they're going to play, but you know what I mean? For me, it's going to be interesting to see how they go about that, because obviously all those players potentially dip in form. You've got to bring new players in. So that's a fascinating thing for this autumn in particular, because I'm guessing they're going to go as hard as they can for New Zealand and win that game and so on, but like how they evolve their squad. And yeah, it'd be interesting as teams move forward and actually have Ireland, without peaking, but have they peaked?
Yeah.
You read those ages out and it's not a massive impact right now, but with the World Cup so close, 2 years away, it seems like it's not a long time.
No.
And trying to manage those bodies, and are they going to be, where are they at in 2 years' time? And who's come through? And if you've invested all those time and they're 35 at that point, and maybe they're not as, there's someone maybe that's hot at that point, but it's got no test experience. It's how you manage that. And I saw Andy Farrell the other week, of course, which you can listen to that episode, and now it's already available. And he hasn't coached Ireland for 8 months. He was he could not wait. I asked him, all lots of different questions. He was really, really open, but he said as soon as the Lions finished, the first thing he was thinking about was New Zealand, Chicago. So he clearly can't wait to get back into that team, back in the environment. So you do understand for this first game, because there's a bit of pressure and all that, is you're going to stick to what you know. But if you don't get the result maybe this autumn, I can see there being some changes quite quickly in terms of, right, we need to blood some other guys. Do you know what I mean? It's almost, you can see that happening of like, I trust these guys, they're going to get the job done or what have you. They've always never let me down. And I get it because they've been terrific. They have, and I'm saying
but the thing is, he can draw upon that for the next couple of years. He can always draw upon that. You can always
dip him in and out.
A bit like Phil on the Lions tour. It's like, he didn't really play, then brought him in because he knew how classy he is. And for a World Cup, I know how good he's going to be. I can bring him in, but I don't need him, hopefully, until that World Cup, or I need him in a big game and that kind of stuff. So that'd be interesting.
Okay, centre is one position, right? Where Ireland have 5 really good options. They've got obviously Archie Henshaw, Ringrose, all Lions. They've got Stuart McCloskey, who's been grinding away in that like one autumn international against Fiji or Japan or whoever for like 15 years.
Feels
He's
like
been picking
years,
up
doesn't it?
Like one cap a year
and
in that
Osborne
game
as well.
Yeah, Osborne. Then you've also got Tom Farrell, who was player of the season in the URC last season.
Hell of a try the other week, by the way.
Great try.
What a touch.
Great try.
If you haven't seen it, chip and chase, little hand over.
Tapping it over the head.
Like naughty try.
He's been playing so well for Munster for the last 2 years, and has got in now. He's still 32. Like, he's the youngest centre in that squad, other than Osborne, obviously utility back. But as an out-and-out centre, all of them are over 32 years old. That is a problem. You can bring Osborne in to fill one of those slots, but otherwise, right, if all of them sort of age out at the same time, you're left with a massive gaping hole. And I don't mean to bring up the W word, right, but it is what happened to Wales, is they had a generation of players all age out at the same time. And I'm going to hope these players get to the World Cup, or enough of them get to the World Cup. But also, and I think like Andy Farrell, obviously I don't know him as you both do, but like strikes me as like someone who is incredibly fiercely loyal, right? And will back his players time and time again, and will back them. Like if they make a mistake, he'll back them to put it right next week and so on. And there comes a level of like, at some point you've kind of got to make the hard call of, do we need to make changes here, or do we need to look elsewhere? And I don't think it's even dropping Bundy Archie or dropping Robbie Henshaw. It's just like looking and pulling someone else out, because there is going to become a problem at some point, right? You think about Johnny Sexton retiring and Jack Crowley only having one test start to his name when he went. And then, Sam Prendergast has come in since, but like, you don't want to be in that situation again with 5 positions. And are they going to have enough to carry them over the line over the next few weeks?
We look at how South Africa often do it. It's almost an experienced head with a youngster.
Yeah.
Outside them, an experienced head. Outside them, a youngster. Not all the time, but you've seen them do it enough where it's like, it's not, right, we're going to start, this weekend, let's say we're going to go a 10 on debut, we're going to go 12 on debut, and a 13 that's got 5 caps. It's like, it's not really the right way of doing it either. There is an argument that maybe, does Crowley move to 12 and Prendergast play 10? Like, what does that dynamic look like? But I mean, the battle of the 10 is quite fascinating, to be fair. Again, I'll be really interested to see who he goes with 10. Because Prendergast has obviously been getting the shirt. Six Nations he played in. Like, what does Farrell do with that position again? Like, but the axis, because of course he has so many Leinster players, he slots into that. They kind of play a very similar system in terms of attack wise anyway. Like, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued about as well this weekend with the game, what New Zealand we're going to see. Because A, I think they can be a bit up and down, but B, when they played South Africa last, they kind of went almost wide and tried to
play around South Africa's blitz and had the skills to do that. Whereas then I think back to when they played Ireland last, and Ireland don't have that same defence. They basically physically went for them and, didn't try to run around. They went at the breakdown, which is going to be a fascinating part of the game this weekend. Ireland and New Zealand are both technically brilliant at the breakdown. It's going to be fascinating, I think, if New Zealand, how should I put it, roll their sleeves up and go route one against Ireland and try and physically beat them up rather than trying to play too much rugby. And still, they've got the skill to do it. But New Zealand, I think, have that ability to play rugby, but at the same time, when they need to make it an arm wrestle and beat teams up, they can go to that game. And I think it might be interesting, New Zealand coming to the Northern Hemisphere over the next month, whether they basically start making games, not trying to out rugby teams, just trying to physically beat them up. When you look at the guys they've got, like Satiti and Sarvea, and in the back line, the Barretts are big boys, you know what I mean? And they've got those they've got those guys that are technically gifted, but also physically will take it to you. I
think what New Zealand have, the Rugby Championship, bearing in mind they only lost on points difference in the end, wasn't it? That's how they actually lost. I think given the Rugby Championship and then having this small break before doing the autumn actually puts them in a really good position because they can kind of absorb all the bits they need to get quite, that aren't maybe as consistent in their game as we've seen before during this sort of break between the Rugby Championship and the autumn international about to start. And during that, like Scott Robinson's obviously a hell of a coach. You can see that. So his knowledge, I think New Zealand are going to be very, very impressive this autumn. I just got this feeling that he's been in it for a year now, or over a year, sorry. And second time to ever go on the autumn series for him, knows what it's about now, kind of got a team that, like you say, have gone on a little bit of the radar, but also haven't, it's just more the Argentinian second game and those results, and obviously the Springboks one. But actually, I don't know, I just got this feeling New Zealand are going to be really impressive this autumn. I just think that it's going to come together.
It's been really interesting watching them because I think the big problem I always felt with the Ian Foster team was it never felt like they had a clear identity. You never quite knew who they were or what they were doing, and they seemed to change quite willy-nilly at random, where this Scott Robertson team does change often and does play different game plans, but it feels more like they're building out a complete whole instead of just changing because the coach has changed their mind or players have responded badly to how they played last week or whatever it is. And so I think, as you're saying, there are 5 distinct game plans they pull out, right? And it feels like, is this the campaign where they try to bring some of those together? Because sometimes we've seen them go, I think it happened that South Africa game where they got hammered in the end, in a game where they were the better team for the first half. And it was bizarre that it ended up being their biggest ever loss of all time. Because they played the right game plan in the first half, kept it tight, but then when that game changed and South Africa played differently and South Africa adapted, they couldn't adapt in turn. And I think that's the one real work on for New Zealand at the minute, is that ability to kind of switch between game plans and switch between approaches a bit clearer. In the way you think back to all the great New Zealand teams, they've always been to do that in seconds, almost without even talking to each other, just kind of instinctively knowing how to do it. And I feel largely the same. I think this is probably, going off nothing but vibes, this feels to me a little bit like, is this the campaign where the Scott Robertson All Blacks kind of click into gear and they come towards that kind of Crusaders promise that we felt when he was first appointed?
I think they do. And if I try my best to sort of take the listeners and viewers into what it's like playing against New Zealand when they're on it, there is no let off. The pace of the game is far beyond anything you've experienced. The skill level that they're able to hold onto the ball and manipulate you, as drag you left, right, centre. You finally get the ball, maybe you turn it over, they punish you. It takes you to a place that you just can't fathom when they're on song like that, and the way that they play and the intensity and the physicality as well. Everyone talks about South Africa and how physical they are, and they are. But New Zealand, my gosh, they don't get the correct, because of all the other, I suppose, the nice bits you see, people underestimate how physical they are as a team. And I just think this weekend in Chicago against Ireland, that haven't been together for long, their season's only just started. I just think intensity-wise, they've got the ability to take them to a place which is just, and I've been there, and it is horrendous, isn't it, Coley? They drag you all over the place and you can't stop it.
Well, the thing as well, New Zealand have a set forwards that can go toe-to-toe with anyone. And again, you look at Manchester City, Surveyor, you've got the front row, I always talk about to Mike Williams, but De Groot, they're ginormous men, and Fletcher Newell, and then they've got the second rows, Scott Barrett does it.
It's been ridiculous.
Exactly. How good has he been?
Yeah. He's so good.
And that's what I mean. Like, so you look at the full pack, they can compete with anyone. And they're physical and they have the ability. They've all got the skills to be able to play rugby, but they're also clear breakdowns at sort of on the floor and can smash it. And then they have a backline that has the skills to make the right decisions and play. And I think that's where, and the skill set to shift to the next. Like when they play South Africa and they go in edge and they bring in the only team in the world where basically I think Will Jordan basically came in and played first receiver, passes out the back, and then they go to the 10, or they go to the 12, and then passes to the 10, and then passes to the 13, passes, you know what I mean? Like the whole backline was involved in, and it's rare you see that because basically you have a winger on it, but like it was phenomenal. And only ended up getting spanked in that game, but you could see how they can play. They have that ability to pull teams apart, but then actually when they need to, they can come direct, and it's going to be, I say, with the intensity, if they're fit and they've come off the back of the championship, you can see them trying to blow off. You can see them trying to hit Ireland fast and hard and almost like just shock them with intensity, break down. And that's what I say, Ireland are going to have to be switched on. Ireland can do that. They're technically gifted as well, but like just shock them with that intensity, build a score, and then see where the game goes.
And actually, the more you talk about that, the more you realise, well, actually, it makes sense why he's picking who he's picking. Because then they've played against it, they know what is coming and all that. And actually, so you can see why there's a lot of disgruntled who say, like, why are you picking that and all that? Actually, well, when you start talking about it, it's like, well, actually, it makes sense.
Yeah, but you look at like, sorry to go back, but you look at like South Africa, New Zealand. You look at the intensity of that first half, the ball in play, the edge to edge, like both teams going at it, end to end stuff. You're like, that can break teams. And if you that was at the midway through the championship, you know what I mean, the Rugby Championship, whereas that is your first game of like an autumn series, and New Zealand taking, you can live with it for 40 minutes, 50 minutes maybe, but like you get to 60, 70, 80 and this team's conditioned to play that way, you're a bit like, it's going to be, and then so it'd be interesting how Ireland, because Ireland and New Zealand I think they're set up in the same way in regards to they want to play multi-phase and they're sort of how they play the game. So it'd be fascinating to see how teams cope with each other, and if they, as you say, how the tactics, like the half-time adjustments and that kind of stuff go into it.
And on that, their fixture list is really kind to them. I think New Zealand, they come into this Ireland game first, which is really easy to get up to for all the reasons we talked about. They play them. They then play Scotland, who they've never lost to, and then Wales, who they will never lose to. No, haven't lost to since the 50s. They bookend the two big games. They've got a chance to rotate and probably freshen the team up a little bit in the middle, and it allows you that chance to like emotionally get up for the games either end, right? Like you're not trying to do it back and back rather than, having a bit of time in the middle.
That leads us on nicely because we've got a question from Jenny. How does Scotland beat the All Blacks?
Easy, just beat them.
Yeah.
Easy.
I don't see Scotland changing the tide against New Zealand. When we start talking about Ireland, how good they are, and I don't see Ireland. I think like New Zealand are coming. I just really sense this autumn they're coming. And I think that Scotland are, there's always that hope with Scotland that, it's like the underdog might do it because they've got they've got players that can do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's always, against the big teams, it's always that last 20 minutes where Scotland just don't quite hang in there.
Yeah. And if they do it, I think there's going to be an element of the All Blacks on a bit of a down after the previous week. I think it's probably in Scotland's interest for them to beat Ireland and then maybe be a bit like emotionally spent, some bruised bodies, like it was a really tough physical game. They maybe rotate the team a little bit. Because that All Blacks team at the minute should beat Scotland. I think Scotland, in a different way to Ireland, are in a weird place because it feels like they've just been in the same place for a very long
We're sort
time.
of ready for Scotland, aren't we? Because you see the results and...
every year Scotland's year.
It's
like Scotland is their year because they've got such talent, especially in the back line.
Some fantastic
the full back
players.
rowers and like even the front five, they've got great players, but it's kind of like every year, and then that year goes past and you're like, next year's the year. And it's like, they've put it together, and if they do get hot, they're incredible, aren't they? But it's just how do they, and it's time not running out, but for the core group of players they've got, you get another year on, loading and building the line. So how much are they coming into this autumn series ready to roll? And say if you catch it'll be interesting, fascinating when, the All Blacks go to Murrayfield, and because again they're similar teams and they want to play rugby, and Scotland play in multi-phase, but then if New Zealand roll the sleeves and beat them up, like if physical arm wrestle, you probably back New Zealand, but then it's going to be a fascinating game how they do it.
I mean, at some point we all stopped saying this could be Gloucester's year. Like we just got very used to it, didn't we? Like, oh no, they'll probably have a good start of the season and fade off somewhere through playing some insane rugby that should never have been recommended. And I think, look, there's a little bit of that to Scotland is they need to kick on a little bit. Hugh Jones is injured and is going to miss the autumn, which is a bit of a loss for them. Sione Tuipulotu's kept the captaincy. Him, Finn Russell, there's a few players in that team who have it in them to beat the All Blacks. Jamie Richards played really good rugby over the last year. They've got a strong enough team. And The thing is, Scotland will only beat the All Blacks, I think, playing like a very expansive, high-scoring game. But I think a lot of their best rugby, or the closest they've come to beating them over the last few years, has been when they've tightened things up an awful lot. And I don't know if that's the way they can possibly open it up. They've got a new defence coach coming in. There's obviously Steve Tandy going off to Wales. Lee Radford, formerly of Northampton's, come in. And that Northampton defence over the last few years wasn't perhaps what they were best renowned for, you know? They were very much a team who had like a good defence that would look to sustain you for long passages of time and look to keep you out, but was sometimes quite vulnerable off the first couple of phases. And if you imagine it's going to be something similar, that is where New Zealand score an awful lot of their points. That is a real opening there. I don't mean to do down the chances. I think it's possible that Scotland could do it, but they've got a game against the USA first up, and it's preparation, it's time together, but knowing Gregor Townsend's kind of classic Tony Tombola selections, you'll probably pick a load of like lads from Glasgow you've never heard of together, put in, like most of the first teamers won't play until this New Zealand game. They'll then come in together and won't have had much of a warm-up. And you wonder, I don't know, again, don't mean to do it down too much, but it feels like a long shot at the minute.
You watch Scotland, and I watch Scotland, and I really enjoy watching them play because they do play great rugby. There's a real ambition to try and break teams down through multi-phase. Like Finn Russell controls the game very, very well in terms of territory, but equally playing. They run great strikes, really well thought out. Townsend is clearly got a rugby IQ, high rugby IQ in terms of how he runs his strike plays and all that. Darcy Graham for me is one of those great sort of rugby of all shapes and sizes, like electric footwork, real handful, great play. You got Van der Merwe on the other side, of course. Like Scotland have talent. They're a very, very good team. I just haven't seen it against, let's say, a New Zealand or a South Africa to suggest that this time's going to be different. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Thriver. If you go to their website in the episode description, you can get 20% off your first blood test if you use the code LOVEOFRUGBY.
Thrive is a personalised home blood testing service that helps you improve your health, and we've been partnering with Thrive for the whole of 2025. So they've helped us see how our health markers have improved and how we've changed from being professional athletes to professional podcasters.
I recently got my Thriver test back, and it's tracked my markers, and I found out that I was actually low in folate. The Thriver app recommended I tweaked my diet by eating a few more green vegetables, which I've already started to do, and I've noticed I've got more energy on the back of it. So from the results, coming back in, tweaking a few things, Coley, I'm on the way up, mate.
Good stuff, Ben. If you'd like to make informed choice about your lifestyle, give Thriver a go. You can use the link in our episode description and use the code LOVEOFRUGBY to get 20% off your first blood test.
That's Love of Rugby for 20% off your first blood test.
We've got a question from Wales fan Jason, who says, please tell me that Steve Tandy can make us competent at rugby again.
Competent's a strong word. No, here's the thing, right? And maybe this will prove to be wrong. There's something about, if you'd asked me a week ago how I was feeling about this Welsh team, I think it probably would have been like a very long sigh, and that would have been the extent of the podcast. We wouldn't have broken the record of the last time when it was the best podcast anyone's ever had.
And then just ended with, we'll be back on Thursday or Monday.
Yeah. But I think there's something in listening to Steve Tandy talk, the interviews he's done, and the squad he named over the last week, has given me a sense of of positivity and of ambition. And I don't necessarily think Wales are going to be a team, they're playing New Zealand, South Africa. I don't think they're going to win those games. But there was something I really liked that Steve Tandy was asked very directly, what would be a good autumn for you? What do you want to get out of this? And he said, I'd love to be saying 4 wins, but really what I want, and I really like the answer, was for people to watch us and get a clear sense of identity and know who the team are, know where we're going, and go I can tell who Wales are. I can tell the kind of team he's trying to build. And I really like that as an answer. And you look at that squad and you can already tell that, there is a clear sense of identity, right? You can tell by the players that were left out, the likes of Tommy Reffel and Sam Costello, feel like they're out because they don't fit the identity of the team rather than Gatland kind of randomly selecting things. And that was a big problem over Wales for the last couple of years, was Gatland won Six Nations was going, we're going to be an attacking, running the ball team. And they were terrible at it. So then next campaign, he goes, we're going to kick the ball more than anyone else. And they still lost. So the next campaign, he goes, I'm going to, bring through loads of youngsters. That doesn't work. Next campaign, it becomes, let's bring back Gareth Anscombe and Talupe Faletau and Reece Priest and then Jamie Roberts and Scott Gibbs and like, you know, the whole lot.
Craig Cornell, Scott Cornell.
Yeah. Rob Howley's going to come down and sit on the bench, get the whole lot out. Gareth Edwards, JPR could fill a hole. But there was no clear sense of identity to Wales, right? It felt like Gatland was kind of making up as he went along a little bit in that second stint, where Tandy, I feel like, has an idea of how he wants to play. And like all of those, the 5 new caps he's picked, all fit quite a similar mold, right? You've got the kind of Danny Southworth, James Fender, who's like a big second row, kind of come through the same like factory as Adam Beard, Alan Wynne-Jones, Ian Evans, Ian Goff before him at the Ospreys. And, you know, they all fit like Chris Coleman, all fit a kind of like hard-edged, like kind of fit the mold of like a team who are tough to beat, with then the one kind of bonus call, who's like, if you want a player to keep an eye out on, Morgan Morse, 20-year-old number 8, who is very much kind of the Welsh Henry Pollock, but without the celebrations, but like incredibly quick, incredibly dynamic number 8. Scored a try that went very viral on New Year's Day last year, 2024, where he, you know, took the ball off a goal line dropout, ran it back, scored 50-meter individual try. He is lightning quick. He's very dynamic. He's like one to keep an eye out for. But I don't know. I feel like there's a broader optimism, right, of Wales will be better this campaign than they have been the last few years.
It's been crying out for some change at Wales, and they've got it, right? There's some bits up in the air, but we won't bog down on that in terms of the clubs and all that stuff. Yeah. I think what you're going to see, and I agree, is Tandy will set them up that suits that team, as you say, have a clear identity. And I think for Wales, like they may not have a great autumn, but an improvement for Wales is, and it sounds really disrespectful, but be competitive.
Yeah.
Like be in the game. Like if Wales are in the games, you know, with at 70 minutes or right at the end, they're still in the game. Like that for me is improvement. And I think don't judge Wales in this autumn. I think judge them at the end of the Six Nations, you know, coming up. And I think that's when you'll see a better identity in terms of what they are and where they're going. But there's no doubt about it. Steve Tandy is, you know, he's also spent so long coaching Scotland in terms of defence. He knows Northern Hemisphere rugby. He played. He's been previewing against his Wales team. He knows the identity of what he thinks would be difficult against Wales and what he expects. And I think I'd be quite optimistic about Wales. I do. I think it's a fresh start, clean slate, and I think they've still got some very, very good individual players. Yeah. Thomas Williams, you know, arguably one of fantastic night. Reece Samet, like can score out of nothing. They've got some game breakers.
I think it's like if you compare 23s, Wales probably have a bit of a talent gap. However, they're a young side. But I think previously the setup didn't put those players they had in the best positions to succeed. And I think under Tandy, the competence is a strong word, but I think the ability to have a game plan that fits the players and puts them in the best positions to compete. And they might lose, but as long as like there's improvement actually, so the identity's coming in. Wales, you know, one thing playing Welsh teams, they play for 80 minutes and they stick in it and they are tough to beat. And that's just like the traditional Welsh identity. And then you add on top of that the ability of Reece Samet and stuff to score and the break in the players you have and all that kind of stuff. So I think like, yeah, as long as there's, as you say, an identity starts forming that Welsh team, it sets them up because they're a young team. It sets them up for future years. And, you know, there's World Cup 2 years away, which is, you can definitely build and fly under the radar in regards to, you know, if you surprise people at the World Cup in 2 years' time, it's perfect for Wales, I think.
I think this feels like the campaign as well for Dan Edwards at 10, who won his first cap in that game out in Paris, which was a hiding to nothing. He came on and was asked, can you just continue shoveling the ball from left to right and just being a bit rubbish. Was given a really tough task, then came in against Japan, having been, you know, when Sherritt came in, went, we'll leave the, 21-year-old fly half, we'll leave him out for now. It's potential child safety laws like prevent him from being this level of cruelty. Came in Japan, came with that second test and was brilliant. Was player of the match, scored the winning try. And Steve Tandy said as well in the press conference that he wants to try and, whilst keeping his options open potentially if there's a change in form, pick his 10 quite early. And it feels like Dan Edwards has been playing incredibly well the last couple of years for the Ospreys, has been slowly developing into that kind of game manager. They generally leave him on for 80 minutes and he's become really good at managing those kind of last quarters. And I don't know, it feels like a good situation to be in. If you're a 10 with 5 caps, you've kind of picked up a handful over the course of the last year. To now have a new coach come in and back you and say, no, you're my guy. You know, it feels like a really good setup for him. He's not uncapped. He's been there before. He's won a game for Wales now, scored a try in the process. And he's a very good kind of all-rounder, a very confident kind of young player. There's a story Matt Sherritt told about how the first time he met him was at a joint training session at Ospreys in Cardiff. and he asked him, they wanted to practice their restarts, and he asked him to put one in long in the corner, and Edwards went, why would I? Like the space is open, for a short one. And he was like, no, we're practicing long restart. Can you do that? And he just kept putting it short and wouldn't listen to him because he was like, well, you're not covering that space. I'm putting it there. And kind of that's the player he is. I think it kind of summed him up in a bit. So I don't know. I feel like there's a real chance to build the team around a couple of young players, like the guys you mentioned, the Jack Morgans, the Thomas Williamses, but also a few of the young players who look ready to step up now.
And you got Thomas Williams as his halfback partner as well. So huge experience with helping him. So I think be optimistic. We've got a question from Tina. How much will South Africa miss? Double World Cup winners. We've got Bongi, we've got Villy LaRue, and we've got Vinny Cock.
Not at all, Tina.
Their depth is so good.
They will miss them in regards to their double World Cup winners, but the depth of they will just keep rolling. I don't, you know what I mean? I think
the train ain't stopping for anyone.
Yeah,
is it?
Exactly. It's hard to say they won't miss them at all because it's disrespectful for those guys because they're incredible. But in terms of probably the results, it will not. I don't think it will affect South Africa, and I think also they're going to South Africa build more depth, and those guys you can, if needs be, in 2 years' time for a World Cup, you can bring them back in and just keep adding to your squad. And I think it's a fascinating move for South Africa in the fact that they, a bit like say Ireland did, they evolved, but South Africa has a lot more depth, but they can take those guys out, probably look after them physically, and make sure they can get them to the start line. So in the World Cup in 2 years' time, they've got a squad of 50 blokes they can pick from, and if the games start tightening up, they can drop those guys in. If they want to play loose, they can do something else. But yeah, I think it's all part of Rassie's master plan to dominate the world.
Also, Faf de Klerk and Mpimpi is also not on the squad, but I think they're on standby. I think.
Standby.
But for me, you can see it's not as if they can't bring them back in.
Yeah.
It's just they've just got it. Doesn't that just complement how much depth they've got? It just kind of says that because for a lot of other nations, would you leave that caliber of players at home or on standby? Probably not. But it just show you the pure depth that they do have? And you'd argue that for a team, the 2019 team, the 2023, the 2027, it's going to look different. That cycle of 19 to 23 wasn't a million miles off.
Yeah.
But the next cycle, it will look different. And actually 2 years out is probably the time that you can sort of see what the squad looks like without them.
Yeah.
But equally still have the ability to bring them back in.
And I think it's really smart to bring through that generation now, get some game time in them before the World Cup, because there's something, right? If they, say, played France again in a semi-final or a quarter-final or something down the line, right? And France have spent 4 years sieving from what happened, how many years ago? 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years ago. France spent 4 years sieving over what happened in the quarter-final, or potentially New Zealand in the final, whatever. There's a little bit of you in the back of your head, surely, if you've won 2 World Cups, right, that is less fired up when it gets into the 80th minute and you're exhausted than a French team who are I spent 4 years thinking about these pricks and I want to take it to them, than a South Africa team that's gone, well, I've just won it twice, right? And especially if you're tired and you're getting on in years and so on, bringing in a generation of players who don't have that baggage. And I know you should think of winning 2 World Cups not as baggage, but there is a little bit of it must surely a little bit in the back of your head go, well, I've won a World Cup before, right? As you're lining up those last few minutes. I don't know. I think there's something smart in bringing for a generation of players who've grown up expecting excellence and around excellence and understanding those standards and what it takes to win a World Cup, but don't have in the back of their heads anything else kind of weighing them down.
Final question from Vinny. Are France still the best Northern Hemisphere team?
I would say yes. Yes, they are.
I think, yeah. With Dupont, definitely yes. Without Dupont, yeah, probably yeah.
I think Luku did such an amazing job.
He's been so good.
When he came in after Dupont got injured in that Ireland game.
Yeah.
And he'd struggled a little bit in international rugby. Before then, I felt like he hadn't necessarily, dominant for Bordeaux, but hadn't necessarily nailed it. And actually, but I think he complimented France ever since Dupont come in to a level that maybe we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, he's massively gone up gears. You think of him for Bordeaux as well, Champions Cup, how good he's been all year.
I think something you've got to remember psychologically, right? If you're in a squad with Anton Dupont and you get to start a game, you know it's a one-off start, right?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter what you do. You're not playing the following week. You're sitting on the bench, right? So psychologically from a player, it's the first time he's ever probably had the responsibility to go, as a halfback, and they are generals, the halfbacks in France, it's this is my team for the time being. I can genuinely have an impact on this team, and I I know that when I play this week, I'm going to play the next, and he hadn't done that the year before. He'd sort of subtly in and out, and the Garrett had obviously played as well. So just that, and I just felt like he'd been very, very, very good. So do I think France the best team in Northern Hemisphere at the moment? I would say yes, on the basis of Six Nations and winning. On the basis of what I saw in the summer tour against New Zealand, where they picked a very mixed team and still were very competitive in 2 of the games at least. I think France are in a good spot. French rugby is in a very good spot.
Do they have an identity? Yes. Do they have the ability? Have they got depth at most positions? Yes. Have they got like a young crop of players coming through, like we've seen on the New Zealand tour? Yes. Have they got the ability to say their identity? But like you have, say, Entamac and Jalibert, and you've got positions that you can change up and play a different style if needs be. Yes. Like, have you got guys on the wing that even like Bielberry that can break a game, all that kind of stuff? Yes. Have you got full packs that's massive that can just beat everyone up and flatten them? Yes. I'd say France are the best team in the Northern Hemisphere.
Great crowds as well. Great crowds.
Oh, the best.
We touched on it at the beginning of the show, and we'll just finish up with it. The implications for the Men's World Cup in 2027, with World Rugby doing the draw for the World Cup on the 3rd of December. Of course, we will be covering that after the autumn. The top 6 teams, wherever the autumn finishes up, the top 6 teams will be in the first bracket for the draw, leaving the 7 to 12 in the second bracket, and so on and so forth. There is a little bit, because some teams, I'll just read them out, for instance. So England are in 5th at the moment, Argentina in 6th, Australia 7th, Scotland 8th, Fiji 9th, Italy 10th, Georgia 11th, Wales 12th.
Yeah, Japan 13th.
Japan 13th. So what it does show, though, is depending on results,
basically, if
you could get in a really nasty pool.
South Africa, New Zealand, Ireland, France, England are probably assured the top 5. And then after that, it becomes down to Argentina, Australia, Scotland, Fiji. So 4 teams want to get into that 6th spot. So then you avoid the big boys in the group stage of the World Cup.
Because you could have a situation, for instance, where Ireland are drawn against a Australia and a Wales.
Yeah.
For instance.
Yeah.
Couldn't you? So, which would be a very tasty pool.
Yes, that's one way to put it. Yeah. Terrifying from a Welsh point of view. I think for England, there's a worry if they lose all 4 games, then that becomes dangerous. They can drop down to the 2nd seed. Argentina becomes the most important game there, I think. If they can beat Argentina, they should be able to hold on to that spot, considering Argentina, the team directly below them. Likewise, for Argentina, they're probably the team with the most to lose this, or most to gain this tournament, because they can avoid all the big boys and potentially see themselves through as a top seed if they can pull off a couple of wins here. So that game against Wales is probably absolutely critical. If they lose that probably ends their chances a little bit. Where if they beat England, that really boosts their chances. Wales are the banana skin here. They're playing Japan 2nd. Japan are the team directly below them. Almost certainly, the winner of that game will go above the other in the world rankings. And obviously things can change beyond there. And if Wales do miraculously beat South Africa or New Zealand, that will be enough. But really, you're looking at the loser of that game will end up as a 3rd seed in the World Cup, which will be huge. That will be huge if Wales end up down there, or Japan could be the most difficult 3rd seed imaginable. So, yeah, it's intriguing.
I've said it before on the pod a while ago, and I'll say it again. You can see Australia being in the same pool as Japan, can't you? And Eddie coaching Japan still against Australia in a World Cup game. You can kind of see
with
that.
With England in there as well.
With England in there as well, exactly right, yeah. So you can see that. But it shows, and I think 1, 2, 3, 4 are probably all safe in terms of where they sit. England, I think if they get a couple of results, they'll be safe. It's more, like you say, it's Argentina, it's... Can Scotland knock at the door? Can they catch up? And probably not. So really, it's Argentina, it's Australia, and then of course, where do Wales sit?
Yeah.
With against the powerhouse that is Japan rugby.
Right. Well, that brings to a close our episode. But fear not, the fun does not stop there, because we're going to have an Autumn Nation Series draft. And Robbie,
hello.
Would you like to join us?
I would love to.
Perfect. Last time the draft, you finished
4
out of
4.
Perfect. So, what better chance to get back on the horse and
to correct the corruption that happened.
There was some corruption. Not sure about that. I had a good team. I'm going to pick a hell of a team on Thursday. So
we'll see, won't we?
Yeah, we'll see you there, and we'll see you there as well.
I'll see you there. Yeah.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
For the love of rugby.